This is a dress. It has been in storage for a while. I found it at the thrift store. Who knows how long ago? Not me. I do not remember. The plan was always to revamp it, but I just never got around to it. But now I've got one, so it's time to revamp this dress. I slipped into the dress and mapped out a vague outline of where I wanted to cut. Then I took it over to the cutting board and duplicated those lines onto a pillowcase. One should always keep a practice pillowcase handy. I think Oscar Wilde said that. I cut out the basic shape of the front and back and basted them together for a quick try on, which I will not be sharing as the fabric is super duper thin, but I will give you a quick peek of how it looked on Edith. I removed the sleeves so that it was easier to work with the dress, gave it a very satisfying and much needed press, outlined the official cutting lines on the dress, and it was time to do the chop. It's always a bit nerve-wracking to cut into something, but I've really been working on not overthinking things. This day I was doing so well at it that I completely forgot a step.
Oops!
I wanted to shorten the dress quite a bit. To determine just how much, I lifted the hem and pinned it here and pinned it there, checked the button placement to be sure it would work, and I determined 10 inches shorter was the length I wished for. So I cut off 9 inches, which would give me a lovely 1-inch hem. And I rescued that last little button that otherwise would have been swallowed up in said hem. I ended up with several spare buttons, 3 in fact, but one did get swallowed up by the vacuum. That's going to be so very fun to fish out. Here's where I am so far, and I think it's looking pretty good. Now I have to do just a little bit of tailoring. Before, when it had sleeves, it was okay that it wasn't super tailored, it's very loose fitting, but now that it doesn't have sleeves, it's not so fine. So I'm just gonna go in here and insert a dart, bring that in a little bit, and I also might have to bring this in a little bit. I'm not sure because I'm not the exact same size as Edith here. I might have to take this in, might not. I'm gonna start with the dart and then try it on and see what I need to do here. These little strips are just pinned into place. They're helping me hold the dress up while I determine where everything is going to sit. Also, it has helped me determine just how long the straps need to be ultimately, so that's great. The dart is going to go here. Now that I have everything sitting where it's going to ultimately be sitting, I can flip this inside out, pin the dart, and then stitch it. I've also found out that yes, I do need to take this side in just a little bit, just about 3/8 of an inch. But before I made the darts and took in the sides, I had to address the back. I wasn't sure at the start what shape I had wanted to go with, so I went with the shape you see here first because I knew if I didn't like it, then I could just easily change it to the other option I had in mind, which is what I ended up doing. I just cut it straight across. Sometimes you just don't know until you try it on. That goes for clothes you purchase and for clothes you make. And with that out of the way, I felt free to adjust the sides and add the darts. Face-off time. Did I say face-off? I meant facing. You will rarely find me in a face-off.
I don't like confrontations!
For the facing, I used my excess hem fabric and cut out a shortened version of the front and back pieces. That chunk of fabric also supplied me with pieces for straps, the length of which I had previously determined with those practice pillowcase straps, but since figuring that, I had lost about 4 inches from the back, so at least 4 inches had to be added onto the straps. Now, I didn't want the dress to get too bulky. The fabric was substantial, but it did have a bit of a give to it, and to keep the top edge from getting all wibbly wobbly and wavy, which is sometimes good, but in this case not so good. To keep that from happening, I pressed a bit of interfacing just along the top edge of the facing, just enough so the stitching line would run over the interfacing. Then I stitched the front and back pieces together, tiny side to tiny side. And of course, since I was nearly finished, I ran out of bobbin thread. Never fails. The straps were a simple fold over, stitch, and flip, right side out with a loop turner.
Isn't that just beautiful?
Sometimes I like to press my straps with the seam on the side, but sometimes, especially for wider shoulder straps, I like to center the seam. When I cut out the front facing, I intentionally included the finished edge of the skirt, but to get the tidiest finish, I unpicked the stitching. Now, I didn't have to. I could have simply stitched the already finished edges together, but the problem with that is that I possibly would have a little bit of a raw edge peeking out. Even if I pushed it a little bit back behind the stitching line, it wouldn't be as tidy of a finish as it would if I unpicked the stitching, folded the facing around the front piece, and stitched across the top, remembering of course to clip the corner. So neat and tidy, and that's when I realized my forgotten step from earlier. I had a step earlier that I said I'll worry about that later, and I totally forgot to worry about it later. You might have noticed this buttonhole is very low. I was supposed to figure where this was supposed to land, because if I don't have it high at the top, it's gonna kind of lean this way, and the other side's also gonna lean the other way. I need it so much higher. And I completely forgot to figure that out. I said I'll figure it out later. Did I?
No.
It is a pretty simple fix. All I have to do is figure where I want that seam to end. That's where my stitching line should be. So now I just have to redraw this on this one and on the other side. I just trimmed them both down a little bit, took a little bit off of the top, and then changed the angle of this just a little bit, and that should do it. So the facing is a little bit shorter here, but that's okay, and we can make the rest of it match. I stitched the facing on except for here, here, and here and here, and I slipped the straps through the open slits in the back and basted them into place. With the straps basted into the back, I pinned the straps at the front to determine the proper placement and lengths, and then I was able to stitch them all into place. Before flipping the facing, I trimmed the seam nice and close. I gave the facing a good old-fashioned press and top stitched it all along the top edge. I didn't want to have a second stitching line on the top edge, but the facing needed to be kept from flapping up. Enter one of my favorite sewing notions, stitch witchery. Which is also called fusible web or binding web or fusible binding web, but I like the name stitch witchery. Yes, I know it's technically a brand name. Anyway, set it between the fabric, stamp, let it cool, and bonded with no stitching line. I could have done the exact same thing with the hem, but I did want 2 rows of stitching there. Yes, I am particular, but that's the charm of making it yourself. You can be as particular as your pedantic heart pleases. And with that, the dress was complete.